one of our groups in our network, the Lafayette Stewardship Alliance, has been working on with DATCP has been fortunate to be a stakeholder in this project. So we're going to hear from its panelists here, just about the different elements of that project, and then we'll Q&A after. So just to introduce folks here, we've got Jamie Fisher with Farmers for Sustainable Food. We have Jim Winn, who is the president of the Lafayette Stewardship Alliance. Siegenthaler with Grande Cheese. Steve Richter with Richter Conservancy. Kory Stalsberg with Southwest Tech. And then Doug Thomas with Houston Engineering. So, and this over to Jamie. Good afternoon.
My name is Jamie Fisher. I'm the project manager with Farmers for Food. Farmers for Sustainable Food is a collaborative, industry-supported effort to promote and support farmer-led solutions to today's environmental challenges. We are the only collaborative, nonprofit organization that provides resources, advocacy, support, and empowerment for farmers who are innovating and demonstrating sustainable farming practices during a time of increased interest in agricultural and food origins. Our mission and value. Our mission: empower farmers to develop and implement practical, innovative solutions collaboratively for environmental, economical, and social good. Our vision is a sustainable food system in which farmers, their communities, and the environment thrive. What we do: unite, inspire, and empower. We develop and manage farmer-led sustainable projects and support farmer-led groups in their efforts. Efforts include administration, event planning and execution, grant writing and reporting, communications, and more. We have developed a framework for farm-level sustainability projects that is a how-to guide for establishing and implementing farmer-led sustainability projects with supply chain support. It is free to anyone and available on our website, farmersforsustainablefood.com. Our framework. Our framework consists of 4 sections: engagement, formation, operation, and conclusion, with steps in each of these sections to consider when starting a project. Focus areas for projects can include both environmental and financial. Our framework has been put to the test through the pilot sustainability project we are sharing more information about today. Through our pilot project, farmers complete financial and environmental analyses to develop benchmarks. Financial baselines were set to evaluate ROI year over year. Farmers determined what conservation practices worked best for their farm. Collaboration is key. This project was made possible thanks to a variety of organizations who come to the table, many of who are here today. Part of this panel to talk about why they wanted to do this and what they got out of it. Every partner is getting value out of this effort, and our focus from day one has been on how we can make projects like this valuable to you, the farmer. I'll turn it over to Jim Winn to share his perspective as a farmer.
You'll have to show me how to run this, Jamie, because I get the tractor away from me and we're down up there. I don't even have to drive it. Everybody hear me? Well, thanks for coming to the event this afternoon. Thanks for Rachel and her staff for puts this together every year. First, what I'm going to talk to you about is our group. Did I screw up already, Jane? Our group, we started in 2016. We started with a relatively small number. There's 5 or 6 of us guys got together. We did have the advantage of Jeff and his group in Dane County was going, and Aaron and Jacob and you guys up there in northeast Wisconsin were starting. So they kind of gave us the lead in starting the group. So we're very, very thankful to them guys. But we started with this, like I say, 5 or 6 guys. We've grown, I believe our membership right now, I believe is somewhere around by the range of farmers. When I first started, we were all dairy farmers, but now since we've had quite a few. We're in cash crop in Southwest. So there's less dairies and more grain farmers down there. But we got guys at 60 cows and a grain farmer that's joined here in the last 3 or 4 years. Runs about 12,000 acres, and he's been very instrumental in that. That was really, we were really glad to see a grain farming guy with that size operation being involved in our group. But kind of letting some other guys join our group. That been a real advantage to us. But something we're very, very proud of. We worked with Houston Engineering, got Thomas down here, has been very instrumental in this project, and Greg Siegenthaler from Grande Chiefs. Greg and I grew up not too far from each other, so we've known each other forever. He's the one that approached me one day about doing this pilot project together. And anytime a dairy farmer and a milk processor could get together and discuss things, nothing good's going to come out of that as far as I'm concerned. So that was, thank you, Greg, for getting that going for us. But you know, collaboration is a key. Great support from Grande Cheese. Mr. Richter here, he been just unbelievable to work with our group, because I know he has been the other groups too, but they were very, very helpful in getting us started and got us to where we are today. So when we got the first when we first got the information, when we sat down with Doug, I mean, it was mind-boggling how particular they are with the numbers. It was very, very impressive. We couldn't believe all the information we were garnering from this project, and it was really, really eye-opening. One of the things like larger dairy farms always kind of get zonked on is, you know, the use of manure. So in this 12,000 acre crop farmer I was talking about, shortly after he joined our group and we was getting to work with this Houston Engineering, he came to me and said, "Gosh," he said, I wish I had more manure like you guys got." He said, "You know, with using commercial fertilizer," he said, "they really ding you on the score." So we were really, really happy to see our GHG scores on our manure and the thing. So that made us very, very happy. We're, like I said, with all our groups, these farmer-led groups, we're trying to get solutions to any potential problem. So I mean that's one of the key things to start the groups. Getting you know, the citizens, consumers have asked for where our food comes from, and this is another reason why we started this program with Grande. As I mentioned, we were really impressed with the numbers from our farms. When we first started looking at all the costs and everything, we thought our costs were quite high. But then when you come back in and you compare, we'll go through the numbers a little bit into more than that too. But our averages, you know, we're, like I say, we're a dairy farm, so we chop every stalk of corn we got. And I believe we averaged, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we averaged 3 tons more per acre than our counterparts. Hey, I think we were short of a ton of counterparts. I think it was 5.85. So we were very, very satisfied with them numbers, and that made us know that we were on the right track. Environmental assessment reiterated for us keep doing this, what we're doing. Trying new practices, implementing conservation where we can. Our farm-led group is making a difference in our communities, more farms using conservation practices. I know over lunch hour I was talking about, we've been growing cover crops in our dairy for quite some time. But once we got our group started, it seemed like that was like 2018, 2019, we really started making a push for cover crops. There wasn't much cover crops planted in our area. Since we really had our annual meetings and our annual field days, concentrating on cover crops, the cover crop program in Lafayette County has just exploded. Nobody used to plant cover crops. Now everybody's planting cover crops. I think we had a large part to do with that. So that was happy. Yeah, I mentioned that the high cost reduction. It's hard to put a number on it when you're keeping your soil intact and soil health. So to us, that means a lot to us. And like I mentioned here, that's the numbers that we're averaging compared to our counterparts. So one of the things we actually learned in our dairy is after looking at the numbers, I think we were kind of cheating our corn acres. And so we made a difference now in this spring. We're going to feed our corn crop a little bit differently than we have in the past. So we definitely learned a lot from that situation. That's what yep, representing dollar.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. As Jim said, I'm Siegenthaler. I'm with Grande Cheese Company. This project started with really a problem that we have as a processor. And all problems come with solutions, whether it's technology or processes, and I'll say it's a little bit of both. Problem was, we really have 3 business units. I'll talk about that in a second. But within one segment of our business units, we were getting a lot of questions about sustainability. Questions, what are your farms doing? What's everybody doing all the way down through the supply chain? Quantify it, call for reports. Typical top-down approach, and we don't necessarily like that. So when SF Group approached us about this potential framework, we really saw this as an opportunity to be a producer-led initiative. We could change the dialogue a little bit with our customers and have it more of a producer-led responsibility back through the process than what we've seen typically. So with that, for those of you that don't know Grande Cheese Company, we're a privately held cheese manufacturer based in the state of Wisconsin. We have 3 business units: the food service business unit, which is principally cheese, and that drives our business. We have a custom ingredients group, and if you're in the cheese business, you're in the whey business by default. That's our second business unit. The third is what we call our producer-supply relationship. I'll talk about that in a minute. All 3 are equally important for us to advance our business. So the first business unit, and again, I mentioned this is core cheese, so this gives you some idea of how we go to market. We're a food service customer, and we're a branded food service customer. So you won't find us in the grocery store shelves, but everything we manufacture goes out with our brand, so we private label nothing. We're an Italian cheese manufacturer of premium products of these 3 categories. So fresh cheeses would be typically something consumed inside 14 days. Current style is the mozzarella type. This is 90% of what we manufacture, consumed within about 60 days, and then the aged products. This gives you some ideas of what our customer base looks like. So on the mozzarella side, you won't find us at Papa John's, Domino's, or Pizza Hut, but you will find us at a lot of independent pizzerias, coast to coast through the United States. And this year we're expanding into the international market, which will first take us to Mexico. But this gives you some example of what our customers look like. And we like to coin the phrase that we're the advocate of the independent and not necessarily the big ones. piece chains. So as I mentioned, the byproduct of the cheese making process is whey. And on the cheese side of the business, we service probably 15,000 independent pizzeria operators coast to coast. On the CIG side of the business, the powder whey side, we probably service about 16. So we have a lot of good customer diversity in cheese. It's very concentrated in the whey side of the business. Those customers are larger CPG, consumer packaged goods companies that you would recognize if you go into your supermarket. They have global reach. When it comes to sustainability, this is where we've gotten a lot of pressure over the last 10, 15 years to fill out surveys that stack and and as I mentioned, it was the top-down approach that we really didn't endorse completely. As I mentioned, we're a Wisconsin-based processor. This is where our manufacturing facilities are. We have 7 plants in the state of Wisconsin. We employ about 1,100 people today. We'd like to employ about 1,250 people today. We all know where that labor environment is. And you can see the Judah facility way down here in the lower left-hand corner, right-hand corner of the screen, is the facility where Jim and a couple other producers that are part of the Velocity Group actually deliver the milk to. That's about 3.5 million pound a day processing facility. So as I mentioned, we have 3 business platforms within Grande: cheese, custom ingredients, food, and our producer partners. We have 76 producers that supply us about, this is a little dated, but north of 120 semi-loads of milk per day. All 96% of the milk, or roughly all of it's within 50 miles of each of those manufacturing plants. Milk being bulky and perishable, it's great to have as close as you can to the plant. We provide a fair amount of support back to our producers. We have a bilingual trainer on staff. We have a veterinarian that's on staff to help with milk quality and milk production opportunities. We have some hedging risk management opportunities, and then a number of other services to help producers partnership. So historically, the relationship between us and the producer has always been what's in the milk: quality, volume, the components. And as we look forward, that relationship's going to change. We have something called corporate social responsibility. A lot of the bigger CPG companies have the same types of relationship descriptors outside of what's actually in the milk. And for us at Grande, we're extremely focused on business sustainability, how everyone takes care of their team or their associates, community involvement, and environmental awareness. This particular project, we felt, checked 3 of the boxes: business sustainability, dairy producers and other farmers that were involved in this project, and the guys that are building their business for the future. We could see that as the first buyer that came on. The second element we felt we checked the box on was community involvement. And that's not talked about a lot, and a lot of it's the environmental sustainability. But the work that FSF has done through social media has really, I think, helped bring the community in and made them aware of what modern ag looks like and the good things they're doing to protect their resources that are environmentally focused. And then, of course, the last one's the environmental awareness component. Goes without saying. So we have different measures within our team that we reach through to our producers to measure each one of those components of social responsibility. And these just are some examples of that. We call it our PACE program. You'll see in the lower left-hand corner, a number of those are environmental. And then lastly, it's the LASA project. This fits perfectly within what we believe as a company is the right thing to do, make consumers aware of the social responsibilities that are involved in the supply chain, rather than a top-down, truly producer-led organization. So we're very proud to support it.
Hi, I'm Steve Richter, and I'm with the Nature Conservancy, and we're a nonprofit conservation group. We literally work all over the globe. I have the good fortune for the past 30 more years to work in Wisconsin. And probably for the past 5 or 10 years, I've really enjoyed particularly focusing my time on working in agriculture and trying to help you all get ideas, funding, resources to try conservation practices, and it aligns perfectly with the farmer-led program. So what I'm going to speak to today is maybe some observations about what are some of the challenges and opportunities to have successful projects between a farmer, a processor, and a global brand like Nestle's or Starbucks, etc. And I'm bringing perspectives from my colleagues from across the Nature Conservancy, who we are asked to really help global brands kind of figure out how they can play a role in addressing conservation challenges. And one of the biggest ones out there today is climate change. And that is really, in the last few years, really driving these companies. And it's a good thing. They want to play a role, and society needs their help to help address the challenges of climate that we face. And they're doing that because in some ways their biggest impact on climate is how the food is grown and produced. And so a company like Nestle's, the largest food and beverage company in the world, over half of their greenhouse gas emissions are from the production of dairy products. Dairy products. Starbucks, we think of it as a coffee company. You could really think of it as a dairy company. It's crazy. They have 30 to 40,000 stores across the globe. Each of those stores is 20 gallons of milk every single day. And so their biggest impact on climate, again, is through dairy. So those companies are trying and have started to try to do projects like describing today. Next. So the Nature Conservancy's role is my colleagues who are scientists really help those companies figure out how can they do all this across the globe. They're working all over the globe in agriculture. So what they do in China or what they do in Africa or Asia, how can that be compatible with what they want to do with farmers in North America? And so my colleagues work on sort of helping those companies shape their business models, as Greg alluded to be more, to have a more sustainability focus. And in some ways, they need to do that if we're going to continue to have a very successful agricultural sector to meet the growing demands of 10 billion people and do it with minimizing our environmental impact. We need companies like Syngenta, Nestle's, and others to really put more of a focus on helping you all as farmers steward your land for generations to come. So it's Greg articulated better than I'm doing it. And then also on the ground projects is another way then, as the Wisconsin chapter colleague, I can help create or frame what a project will look like on the ground. Next slide. So I want to get into maybe some of the nuts and bolts of a project on the ground. This is from Lafayette County. This is a dairy farmer, busy. Farmer, you all are busy. Greg is busy as a processor. And how can we convey to a global brand that, hey, here's another request on a farmer. And these requests, as Greg noted too, they're not going to go away. These companies, it's a good thing. They want to do more to help address these global challenges like climate, but the request will keep coming. The request will keep coming to farmers. to document this, document that. So I like the idea of creating these pilot projects, like what my panel members are doing in Lafayette County, where Grande is providing resources to not just their few dairy farmers, but to any member of that farmer-led group that wants to participate. Next slide. This is a farmer and crop consultant up in Kewaunee and Door County. And it reminds me then of a big challenge that lies ahead is will we be able to provide the technical assistance, the help, the advice to the farmers who are being asked to change practices on their lands in order to meet the demands of a global brand who really wants to be documenting how practices are changing in time to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on a farm. Well, in order to do that, we have the beauty of the farmer-led groups as really training grounds or opportunities to really scale this up across all 34 groups or even more groups as a place to provide that learning, the confidence of sharing knowledge between farmers or between crop advisors who are working with such groups. But it is going to be a challenge for Greg and other processors that they're going to be asking all of their farmers at some day to have to track practices and then ideally be change practices. Next slide. This is a farmer up in Sheboygan County, and it's a reminder to me that then we have to make this valuable or have meaning to the farmers. And in a couple ways that has to be still figured out, and we have these pilot projects to really help figure that out. Is okay, what tools are going to be used to track conservation impacts on the farms? Well, we use in many cases really nice tools of just tracking acres and participation in farmer-led groups, and we're seeing incredible increases across the state, participation and number of acres of practices, say, of cover crops. But for a company like Grande or a company like Nestle's, they're going to need more substantial or transparent or verifiable data to stand up to any potential criticisms somebody might get by saying, hey, you're not doing enough, or prove it to me. So there's different tools that, one of which will be explained today by Doug, that can be used to do that. But how the data is collected, is there going to be an incentive to the farmers to collect such data? So for example, farmers be paid $500 a year for their data. Will it be $2,500 a year for the data? That has to be figured out. And then the second point, farmer, is are they going to be paid by the supply chain to keep putting these practices in place? And will that payment be based on just new practices, such as a new acre of cover crops, or will it be based on a system where if you reach a certain level on your farm, like 50% of your corn silage acres, any given year has a cover crop on it, then you're tiered up to a different payment level, and a payment that is made to the farmer in some way. New practices or maybe a tiered structure. I think many of us, if not all of us here, would say farmers should be paid for this. And it should not just be a request or another demand made on them. So I can see private sector funding coming in and helping complement funding that a group like Nature Conservancy could give, and or an agency like DATCP can give farmers to help make this valuable or rewarding farming. Next slide. This is just this is a reminder that, again, focus on dairy is another challenge, but maybe an opportunity. Is a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions or climate impact the dairy farm is through either a digestion of the ration by the dairy cow. That's a 25% of climate change emissions on the dairy, or 25% of it's from manure. About 25% of it is from the infield practices. Well, we're doing a really good job in farmer-led groups with addressing infield practices and in some ways manure. But feed efficiency is a whole new ballgame with technology through different supplements, different ways that cow could be fed to really get or impact digestion. So I guess what I'm saying there is how these global brands will hit their goals, like in Nestle's maybe it's a 50% reduction in gas emissions, 20%. How they'll reach the goals will really depend a lot on how manure management technology evolves and how what's fed to the dairy evolves. If we really want to address the impact of dairy on greenhouse gas emissions. So maybe in conclusion, I'm hopeful, and what I'm striving for in my discussions with companies is that we utilize the framework of farmer-led groups, and we try to maybe increase membership in those groups by pulling in farmers that are asked to participate in supply chain projects, participate in farmer-led groups, like what we're seeing in this project here, so that we can help build that sharing of knowledge and data amongst farmers and have crop advisors from the private sector and from public agencies like Extension and NRCS that are playing a role. And that to me can probably increase our the opportunities for success as these projects evolve down from groups like Nestle, Starbucks. So, thank you all. Break time, right? I was supposed to lead them all in stretches.
Yeah, if you guys want to get up and
No,
stretch for a minute.
We have what, 5 minutes, right?
Sure.
Question.
We got separated. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Good. So anyways, Kory and I are going to be talking about some of the technical parts of the project. I'm going to be focusing on on-farm sustainability, how that was measured and quantified. Talk a little bit about how we measure the impact on local water resources, lakes, rivers, streams. Kory's going to talk about the financial use. Those are kind of the three legs of the stool. Looking at the project, just a couple of statistics. One is the project, there's 13 farms that are participating. There's roughly over 15,000 managed acres, and we collected, analyzed data on 170 fields. That gives you some scope about the size of the project. If you're wondering about Houston Engineering, we're not from Texas. We're actually a Midwest-based engineering and water resources company. It's named after our founder. We do a lot of work in ag and public drainage, flood control, water supply, rural water in particular, and water resources. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Jim and FSF for the opportunity that we have to work with them and help with them with this project. So on and I've got 15 minutes to probably give you what to take a day. So you're going to get the 30,000 foot look at two parts that I'm going to talk about: on-farm sustainability, local water resources.
So we're using Field to Market's field print platform. It's a nationally recognized set of metrics. And it really provides a different way, I think, for farmers to look at their operation outside of the traditional things we do, like soil erosion, runoff, and things like that. The 8 metrics: biodiversity, energy use, greenhouse gas emission, irrigation, water use, land use, soil carbon, soil conservation, and water quality. Those are the 7 metrics, and each field and each farm we develop a score. A score is then how you can evaluate yourself, look at it, gain insight into the operation in a way that you maybe haven't done before. And then also opportunities or identify areas for improvement. And it's also really important to mention that this project operates under a very strict confidentiality agreement. Contracts, Field to Market as a national organization never ever release personal information without permission. And if you're participating in the program, you get to choose when you turn off and turn it on. So if you say, look, I'm done, I want to be out, vote goes to Field to Market, you're out of their system, nothing's ever kept. And so I think it's always important to know that information, really very important to you all, and not wanting to obviously see that getting into the hands of someone else. Next slide. So the next 2 slides are going to talk about what kind of the farmer in the project is. So in year 1, we're there to create a baseline for each farm field, or each farm. Then we also develop project benchmarks for each of the sustainability metrics. We develop customized farm reports for each farm, and then we also start doing an aggregate report where we normalize the data and we aggregate it so that it can be anonymous and used in different ways. And then probably I think one of the more valuable pieces, and I'll attest to this, is the farmer-to-farmer meeting. It's an opportunity, not required, that every farmer can participate. They come together, share the results, aggregated farm comparison. You get to see where they are maybe in relationship to their neighbors. And it can really promote, I think, some good discussion about ultimately, well, what are you doing that you got that score? What might I think about my operation? We're never going to give you recommendations on practices. Those need to come from your local trusted advisor, crop consultants, your local conservation professionals, whoever you use to work with. That's not our role in the project. So as you look at that spider graph, we'll talk about a little bit later. That blue area would be your footprint for that field. Green is state benchmark, orange triangle national benchmark, and the purple diamond is the project benchmark. So it's a very quick way to see that particular field, how your work that you're doing, the management and conservation practices, are measured against project benchmark, state benchmark, national benchmark. Next slide. Year 2 and 3, it's an opportunity to then to begin to evaluate scores of each farmer. We do that individually. It's an opportunity for the project to start looking at establishing goals for possibly improvement or increasing, decreasing a particular metric that might be really important in your area. We'll typically continue to collect and analyze data for 2 or 4 more years, depending on the length of the project. And that's important because you need a minimum of 3 years to identify trends and the reporting of measurable outcomes through that Field to Market Continuous Improvement Accelerator program for each project that this project is involved in. Again, continuation of the farmer-to-farmer meeting. I just point out this, it's a little tough to see, but this is the water quality metric. It's locally for pathways, surface runoff, phosphorus, groundwater, impact of phosphorus, nitrogen, surface water, nitrogen, groundwater. Basically what that says, if you get a score or a ratio of 1, you've done everything you can from a practical standpoint as a farmer, you have mitigated impact on that particular pathway. Less than 1, basically says how you refer to it. I'm going to go real quickly through a couple of examples. So at the field level, every field that we collect data on gets this field print analysis summary. Same thing you saw before, but in this case, it's a corn grain field. The metric is soil conservation. The average on that field is 2.6 tons per acre per year. It gives you your score in comparison to that project benchmark for neighbors. state of Wisconsin, or in the case of the Lassa project, you actually use Illinois. You measure so close to Northern Illinois. And then national benchmark. So it's a way to compare that. Next slide. So then, and this information is all from UW Pioneer Research Farm in Platteville. They gave us permission to use their information. That's why it's up here. Again, we would never share individual farm information unless we had express permission to do so. So what we do is we take all the fields, and in this case, on the left is corn silage, and it's the soil carbon. And so the project benchmark was just under, let's see, 0.4, I think it was like 0.37. In this case, for soil carbon, you want to see scores above 0. So if it's above 0, what you're doing, you're likely to be increasing soil organic matter, thereby increasing soil carbon. You can see in this case, the corn silage fields, they're below project benchmark. So maybe an opportunity for the farm manager to say, well, what are we doing differently? What are some of the things we do from a management perspective or adding conservation practices to change that? On the right is the soil conservation score, project benchmark, and that purple line, sit on the one, over 3 tons per acre per year. Project benchmark is like 0.6 to 0.7. And again, this is for a corn silage crop. Excellent. That gives you an idea of what you're going to get. So if you've got 10 fields corn silage, if you're in the project, you're going to get 10 bars like that, and you're going to see how those fields compare with your other fields on the management. Then we provide a farm house. This, I think, is probably one of the more useful pieces, because it basically says for the 3 crops, in this case, corn, grain, corn silage, and alfalfa. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but basically we can show metrics. In the case of the Lafayette Ag Sustainability Alliance project, they said soil conservation, soil carbon, land use efficiency, and water quality were really kind of important metrics for them. We could include the others up here, but it would be so small you couldn't see it. So what it does is it basically shows your farm against the project, state and national averages. So it basically takes all of that example, puts it into an formalized aggregated score for the farm, and that's for each of the crops that are known. You're going to get the project participants. You get a map of the fields that are enrolled, those farm averages. They get some time spending how the field market field big out. And again, some of the things that they might consider that could improve the scoring. So then this last one here, our slide on sustainability metric, when we jump into local water resources. This is one where these are aggregated, anonymized farm scores. So you can't see it on the bottom there, but it actually lists all of the individual farms with the project ID number. So nobody knows who that is. But in this case, there were 9 farms that reported corn silage in 2019. So carbon index, again, you can see quite a fluctuation there. So an opportunity, I think, for the project and the farmers to say, well, what's influencing that? What's causing some of that to happen? So in the case of soil carbon, higher score is better. In the case of soil conservation, lower score is better. So this is the kind of information that project participants are going to see. And what you would get, for example, if one of your groups decided to start up a project, we'd be kind of getting the same information. Next slide. Lastly, it's a way for us to show the project in comparison to state national benchmarks. This is the kind of thing that Grande cheese is really looking at, how it talks about the role of their producers, their farm management, work that happens on the crops, not necessarily the dairy itself, how that compares and how they can report that to people that they're selling their products to. Water resources, again, it's the idea to move beyond that into field, what's happening on the field. Think about those resources, what's happening at Lake River Stream, some watershed element, or project area. I think we're gonna push the head here on target. So I said the next slide. Just a couple of real examples here. This is the area down in southwest. This guy's Lafayette is right in the middle there. And what you're seeing is the watershed. This is the drainage area that leaves the county on the bottom edge there. So this is the drainage area in the watershed. And we do source assessments. Watersheds. And we look at what is the estimated potential loss of sediment, phosphorus, nitrogen, and we also do some work on water sensitivity. So there's a separate map. In this case, the darker color represent areas, catchments, 30 to 40 acres in size, that are likely to be treating more sediment in other areas. So it gives us spatial ways to look at where hotspots are, maybe where somebody would like to focus some marketers, communication, or potentially financial assistance, so maybe get at some of those areas where you see higher concentrations of that. The sediment, again, we just used a whole bunch of data, soil survey information, climate data, land use information, things like that. Next one. So what we're able to do with those source assessments is to really run these analysis in different areas, but really to say what is the benefit. How do we estimate the benefit of what people, conservation practices, management, and it's what your impact, positive impact, is on those local water resources. In this case, we just said, let's pick a very small watershed, sub-watershed, where we had a high concentration of fields that were in the field print platform. We had information on adopted conservation practices, tillage, and management. Next slide. So then we did that, basically said, okay, what's the impact? And in this case, you can basically see that circle graph over there, 28% reduction in sediment. That little sub-watershed, conservation work, farms, and fields and all fields that factor. It's a way to kind of show and demonstrate that there is, in fact, improvement that has occurred because of that adoption. In this case, we can say low water is about 46% reduction. Last slide. And then the final, last slide. I'll find out the second here. Scaling up conservation. So the other unique thing about the tool that we're using is to basically say, well, let's look at what would be some implementation scenarios. So in this case, what that map shows is it says if you adopted cover crops on 50% of the fields that are suitable for cover crops, what would the sediment reduction leaving state line of green dots, which are the watershed outlets? Basically said if you did that, you would expect a 35% reduction in sediment, 24% reduction in nitrogen in surface water, 20% reduction in phosphorus to this water. So you can begin to look at the impact of future or plant conservation. We like to scale up. We say we want to see an increase in a particular store. You can run these kind of scenarios through this tool to get an idea of what impact. So I think a very powerful way again to talk about the impact and the importance of the work to all of it. Last one is just another end here, another quick way to say, let's say you want to go after some additional federal funding, regional conservation partnership program, conservation innovation grant, you name it. We can use that, but you guys can use that tool that I'm going to know. It's there. To basically say, well, give me a location of top 100 practices that impact sediment. This is just an example of what that should look like. Red and colored dots are those 100 practices. So it's kind of looking at the whole experience. And we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. Focus and target efforts have the maximum benefit for sediment reduction to that watershed outlet. So with that, let's go over to Kory. Not sure who picked the order of our presentations, but I know they didn't say the best for last, so. My name is Kory Stalsberg. I am a farm business production management instructor with Southwest Technical College down in Fenimore, Wisconsin. We were asked to join this project to complete financial analysis for the farms that, well, those 3 farms the first year. That's the document that you have at your table. Fortunately, I didn't realize the group was going to be this large, so I only had enough to put 2 at the table. However, if you did not get one by arm wrestling at your table, I do have a few extras, so you can see me after if you'd like your own copy. We were asked to do the financial analysis. So, who's familiar with FinPack or FinBin? Anybody heard of those? All right, great. So that's the tool that we use. And there's a number of technical colleges across the state. So if you're interested in completing your own farm analysis, you can see where we're located at. There's approximately 6 that are have a farm business program that complete this process with their students that they work with. So if you're interested, I can get you the names of these instructors as well, or you can look it up on their website. So across the state there. The tool that we use is FinPack. I'm glad that you guys, several of you are aware of what the program is, or at least have heard of it, but it's really an analysis tool. So it's not a record-keeping system. It's more for us to be able to evaluate the farm's performances. So it starts with your balance sheets. We enter in an income statement, a profit loss statement, and then allocate those income and expenses out to each of the different crop enterprise and livestock enterprises. So each of the enterprises on the farm are going to have a very accurate true cost of production that we share with the farms that we work with. For this project, I'm going to warn you that we did not use any overhead expenses. Okay, so overhead expenses is intermediate interest, long-term interest, machinery depreciation, real estate taxes, things like that. We did not want any of our data to be too identifiable. Okay, so we have direct cost of expenses for the 3 commodities that was mentioned earlier. So for corn, for grain, corn silage, and then hay. So what's going into those direct expenses is listed on that front page, but it is seed, fertilizer, chemical, crop insurance, custom hire, which is a pretty big variable on a lot of these operations. Custom hire and fuel, oil, land rent, again, that's a variable, but we didn't use it as part of our expense. And then operating interest. So those are all of the expenses that are going into our comparison here. So we have our farm cohort, then we've sorted the database, and if I get here, FinBin is the database that we use. So the Center for Farm Financial Management, based out of Minnesota, they house this program. And there's about 3,522 farms that submit data to the FinBin database. So we were able to sort the database according to size and production practices to be able to compare our project farms to a Minnesota and Wisconsin cohort, and then just the Wisconsin farm cohorts. So it got kind of tricky though, because the farms that we worked with were relatively large, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 cows up to 2,800 cows, and running somewhere between a couple thousand acres each. So there wasn't a lot of data in our database, in the FinBin database, to be able to compare these farms to. However, we were able to sort it out. Most of the comparisons are about 25 to 30 other farms that we're comparing as a benchmark. So the year 1 financial results, we sorted out by 3 areas. So as you look at your year 1 report, we have it sorted out for yield, direct cost of production, and then return per acre. And that's the one that I like the best. I'm glad Joe mentioned it in an earlier presentation, but they were looking at return, not necessarily a yield, but the return on investment to the, now I like to move the food too. Heading up here. No. So, yeah, that's one that I really feel is the most important, is that return on investment. What are we getting back from this? So I snipped out all the graphs. I'm hoping, I know I was sitting over there, it's a little hard to see, but again, if you want your own copy, I'll be available during the break. You can grab your own. But what I did is I just pulled out each of the crops. So this is corn for grain production. We sorted it by yield, direct cost, and then return per acre. And you can see that the environmental practices that Jim and the other farms that are part of this data set have implemented did not affect the yield. Overall yield, we're actually about 3.5 bushels better than a Minnesota and Wisconsin database combined as a benchmark, and about what, six bushel better than the farms in Wisconsin, average farms in Wisconsin. Direct cost of production is more expensive though. You can see that to raise a bushel of corn, it costs us $4.34 compared to the averages for Minnesota and Wisconsin around that $3 and $3.10. Why do you think that is? Buddy. Okay, rent could play into it. One of the things that I know is playing into it is our custom hire, and particularly manure. That is an expensive custom hire. We separate manure by putting half of it on the livestock section or the enterprise, so the cows pay for half of it, and then the crop pays for half of it in the form of fertilizer. So that is a part of it. Land rent could have been part of it. But these guys are also implementing some cover crop as well. So there was an additional cost for some seed. There was a higher cost on the chemical as well that plays into this. Return, I should mention that, return to the acre is a little bit lower than the Minnesota, but it is greater than the Wisconsin cohort for corn for grain. Corn for grain is the only one that the return was less than the other cohorts out of our project farm. Corn silage. So all of these do use a cover crop after their corn silage, and they terminate that in the spring prior to planting. Yield, you can see, is significantly better. Direct cost for corn silage is also higher, and I'm going to attribute it to the same reason that corn for grain cost of production was higher. But when you look at return on investment or return per acre, corn silage shows quite a significant increase in revenue. Part of that might be, as well as we tried to dive through this data and really analyze it. The project farms all grew a BMR variety, so the value of that crop is actually about $10 greater than the conventional variety. So that could also contribute to that return on investment. On the hay production, this is probably the crop that is most significant to these dairy operations. They all have a very high production and very high quality alfalfa production. Yield, you can see, is significantly better, 8.8 tons. So what's that? 1,600 pounds more per acre or so of hay production. Direct cost, again, is a little bit higher on that cost of production. But we see a pretty significant, again, return per acre for that alfalfa crop. So as we kind of break down the results, and I asked you a couple questions earlier on, but from the project farms, what are some of the highlights for year one? We did realize that there was a higher cost of production. However, on 2 of the 3 crops, we realized a greater return on that investment though. So for corn, alfalfa, corn for grain, it was not compared to the Minnesota farms, theirs was a little bit higher. However, our project farms were not out of line by utilizing these environmental stewardship practices and implementing those on their farms. So year 2, so that was 19, that was 2019, okay? This is 2020 data here now. So year 2 of our project, we're in the process of collecting year 3. So like Doug mentioned, it really takes 3 years to develop a kind of a trend line and really start seeing some of the trends over time. So we have year 2 collected, we're working on year 3 right now, and hopefully by this summer, we'll have a final report on this. So this is the same type of graphs as we just looked at, just not quite as pretty. We haven't had the marketing department go through these yet. Yield for corn for grain, as expected, as the previous year, was higher than our Minnesota farms and our Wisconsin farms. Return per acre this year was a improvement, so that was good. We had a greater return per acre, and very similar results on the cost of production. It stayed higher than our averages. So very similar to the same reasons that I was saying for year 1 of why that cost of production was higher. Corn silage, we dipped a little bit this last year in 2020. We'll see what happens with 2021, but 2020 year, we were down just a little bit, just shy of 1 ton to the acre, it looks like. However, our return was significantly greater again this year. So, or excuse me, 2020. So over $200 to the acre increase revenue generated from that acre of corn silage versus the cohorts. And cost of production was high, same story. Yield on alfalfa higher again this year by about 7.7 tons. Return for alfalfa again significantly higher than our database would call out. And the direct cost of alfalfa compared to the benchmark is a little bit higher at $98 versus an $80 direct cost of alfalfa per acre. This slide I put in, this is the raw data that we use for before we chart it out, and we are refining our skills. We're always trying to improve and make this process better. We're refining it. We're trying to get to really what's that true cost, that financial investment in some types of environmental practices. And the database will eventually be more robust as well. They're going to have more data in it. So I just wanted to call out that we are looking at trying to track just that cover crop expense, okay? Well, you all know there's more than just seed expense to cover crop, right? What else is involved with it? Fuel, labor, tillage, potentially, seeding, you know, so there's a lot of costs that involved with it, but we got to make sure we're consistent when we track it as well. So that's what we're trying to get at. We want to have a consistent way so we can compare where we're at compared to those farms in Minnesota and the Wisconsin database. So that's not going to make the report yet because the only crop that we have with a cover is corn silage right now. I threw this up there. This is my financial trends now over time. So I have, like I said, we have 2 years of data collected. We're in the 3rd year right now collecting 2021 data. But you can see that 2019 is the blue slides or blue bars and 2020s are red bars. And this would be for all the crops. So corn for grain, corn silage, and alfalfa over time. And you can see that these are all on yield. So pretty consistent, I guess you'd say. Our gross return, and again, this is the one I like to look at for the most part. Our project farms are always higher for a return per acre. So even though we're implementing environmental practices that may have some costs associated with it, we are experiencing a greater return per acre than some of the benchmarks. Cost of production, as mentioned earlier, seems like we're always higher on cost of production for each of those crops. And you can see it here over time, comparing our project farms to the benchmarks. What are we getting out of it? What is this data telling us? So year 1 and year 2, kind of the conclusion that we're drawing is we're similar yields, and we're seeing a greater gross return per acre on the project farms compared to the benchmarks. Utilizing many environmental conscious practices is challenging to determine the exact cost of each of those benefits. Okay, so that's the tricky part. Doug's measuring 8, 7, 8 different metrics on this phytogram. We are trying to, but we just are not able to do it very consistently. I'll say that. Okay, we're trying to get to that at least that cover crop expense, but some of the environmental practices we can't put a value on it as we would like. Any questions?
Both Jennifers.
Okay, so the question was, why did we use county averages versus state averages? I pulled that data out of the FinBin database, and that's a statewide resource. I haven't thought about going just with county averages. Yes. So we contribute this data to the FinBin database, so that's what we use as a resource. I think we can sort it by region, but you won't have, it won't spit out a report unless you have at least 10 points. Otherwise, it's right. Okay. Good question. Yes, sir.
Where you put up the table with metrics on there, the different prices for corn silage across all three columns. What, can you explain
Sure.
why those are different?
Yep. Okay. So the question was, why are the corn silage prices different? The easy answer is there's typically two varieties that we put in on a balance sheet. So our brown midrib or BMR corn, higher digestibility, we feel it has a greater value as a feed source compared to a conventional that could be either corn silage or corn for grain. So that's two different prices there. But you have seen different prices to the actually like to the cent, right? It was like 36, 39 different prices there. That would be inconsistencies of farm business instructors putting in closeout prices. Okay, if I put in $35 and my other instructor at Western Tech puts in $40, it's going to average those and come up with a different average. I think that's where you get it. On the corn for grain side, that we always use like a closeout price. This last year was $5.65. Same price as what like FSA would use for trajectory. However, if the producer has bushels contracted at a different price, we always put in the contracted value. So that's why corn for grain fluctuates. And these questions don't have to be with me. Remember, you got 5 other people up here you can drill to it.
Other questions? Oh, those have another one.
Somebody else though, right?
Yeah. Getting into the metrics and benchmarking. You know, one of the challenges we have within a benchmark is, especially at the farm level, I'm doing better than my neighbor. If your neighbor's doing a terrible job, are you meeting the resource needs of the metric you're looking at, be it groundwater quality, surface water quality, or whatever? I saw some presentation in terms of where you're tying it in on a watershed basis. What about going to the next level? You know, you got a TMDL for this water body, you know, just go down the list. You know, how are you tying that together?
Yeah, so on the idea of a project benchmark, it's something that can be done through that field to market, field print platform. As long as you've got 10 farms, you can create a project benchmark. You know, that's the group can decide whether they want to do that or not. You would have to say, well, let's look at state and national. A lot of times it's really just to inform producers in terms of where am I at in relationship to something else. I think that's a logical question. You know, how am I doing in relationship to other farming county, to the state of Wisconsin, you know, farm averages, and maybe national. So that's how that benchmark is used. But I get your point that, you know, oftentimes we just try to make it competitive almost. It doesn't need to be. Because it also, at the farmer to farmer meetings, provides a way to have a discussion, you know, if somebody's willing to share some of that information or perspective about what they're doing. And oftentimes it's some small things that can have a big difference. So that's the kind of the perspective on that. The issue of like water quality and TMDLs, the work that you saw in the second part, that tool that's used, you can actually take a watershed and say what level of practice adoption would be necessary to go from today to say a 25 or 35% load reduction that has been established by the Wisconsin DNR as part of the TMDL. So it can be used to do that. And so in some respects, it's a way to say, okay, we have an implementation plan. We have a plan of what we think needs to be done. And with some degree of confidence that you might be able to achieve that and set forth in the
How I use benchmarking on the financial side is we'll run a report on, let's say, your corn per grain crop against our database. It's typically somewhere in the neighborhood of corn per grain, probably 5,000 entries into that particular crop. So I put your farm against all those other farms, and then I have it separated into percentiles. So 10% all the way up to 90%. And what the program will do is kind of create a scatter graph, and it'll highlight what level of percentile you're at for each of your income and each of your expenses. So it should kind of look like a shotgun on a piece of paper, highlighted cells, because you want to be in the upper end on some of your income and your yields, but then on the lower end for, let's say, seed costs, fertilizer costs, things like that. So I use it as a management tool. Say, okay, why are we above the 80th percentile in veterinary? So I'll ask the producer that, and then we'll have a discussion. Oh, maybe I could do more on my own. That's how I do it.
All right, and then I just have one more question to close us out. So, just wondering, if someone could speak to the future, excuse me, the future of this project looks like, in terms of how it might evolve and how it might help set future goals and future directions of the farm.
Yeah, the board decided we're going to go another 2 years project for
Awesome. Yeah. And then I guess if you're trying to do this with another farmer in the group, is there certain parts or elements of the project that you can change in the future that you are changing? Sure.
Jeff made a big comment about counting states. Yes, pretty accurate.
All right. Looks like we got 2 more questions, so we'll squeeze those in and then we'll take a break. So, Michael.
So just a question for other groups that may not. Yeah, we're similar to what you guys said. What's the cost to do something? Yeah, some farmland groups that go for other slope themselves. What's a group looking at?
Yes, for those who didn't hear the question, the question was about cost to do a project like this.
Good question, like, in some ways it depends on, like a lot of things with scale you can look at. This project, the cost around the order of, say, $50,000 a year. Service, say, 15 farms. And I would add to that, though, what project could look at is then adding to that, maybe triggering on cost incentive programs that would be tailor-made to try to make changes on those scores, so to speak. So in this project, the incentive money from DATCP and schemes and others went to all of the members of the group who were changing practices. You can take a feed of that money or add on additional money to be targeted to the farmers that are participating in this project to provide that premium for their participation. So to me, that would be, say, an add-on of saying, okay, let's reward those farmers each an additional $5,000 a year. Where can we find at $65,000 or $75,000 in addition, that would be incentive money. Then you're talking about over $100,000 per year to have the data, so have this data set that really demonstrates the effort of the group and that is accountable throughout the supply chain. And then you're also providing that of funding. You know, I gave you an example of $5,000 a year to the farmer to work with to say change practices that would work with. So to me, $135,000 a year. A starting point. You could add on some other things that maybe you need to factor in a little bit more money for technical assistance to those farmers. Right now, they're sort of getting it by the sharing of knowledge that comes with the farmer that group maybe wanted to say provide an extra $1,000 a year to extension or what part of agronomist can help or supplement the work that Doug doesn't live down there. You might want to have a local. So those are some numbers about it.
Real quickly, and just also, the cost is really built around those three things. In this case, the number of Steve used was cost of doing the economic or financial analysis, cost of the resource cost of the market, platform. You can choose which one you want. We're doing a project right now for South Dakota where they're just looking at field environment, field platform, and sustainability metrics. So year 2 and 3 are going to be substantially less, probably half or more less than year 1 because we've done all the initial data collection, models, and all of that, extending year 2.
Maybe I missed it, or maybe I just don't understand it, but the greenhouse gas emissions is brought from the corporate level. There was a lot of talk about how we reduce those emissions and how the corporate world is looking into that. But is anybody measuring the offsetting of greenhouse gases and emissions with practices, i.e. not tilling, not having black soil, cover crop out there, and then how much nutrient gas have to be.
Yeah, that's where the field grid platform is generating that greenhouse gas emissions score. It's presented in metric tons per unit, acres or bushels, how you want to present it. And it is actually taking into account practices. It's taking into account management practices, tillage practices, fertilizer application, timing, rate, and all of those things to generate that score. LASA project, after looking at the first 3 years of data, has seen 11% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions from the 15 farms for the 3 years they participated. So there is a way to do that. We're also doing a project with dairy management incorporated. What is the 20-year carbon look back for dairy in the state of Wisconsin? Actually, it's a national project that the farm business in Wisconsin are using. We're going to actually look at and quantify what is that offset we talked about from 20 years ago to today, show and measure the impact of optimum management, conservation practices, tillage, all of those things that individual basis all during energy use, therefore greenhouse gas emissions.
Great. Well, if anyone has any follow-up questions, we're going to reach out to one of the individuals during our break.